Hi everybody, Sharyl Attkisson here. Welcome to another edition of Full Measure After Hours. Today, how America fell victim to a mass delusional psychosis. We are still learning lessons from our COVID mistakes, and we likely will be for some time to come. Today, a conversation with clinical psychiatrist Dr. McDonald, who's author of United States of Fear, How America Fell Victim to a Mass Delusional Psychosis. How did America fall victim to a mass delusional psychosis?
The weaponization of fear. Americans have become compliant. They've become adept at receiving signals to be afraid. And when groups and individuals consolidate their power and activate a national emergency and then offer a solution, which always involves giving up some form of freedom, Americans comply. And they will comply as long as they stay afraid. And we can see that that fear has not left. Walk around the streets of any city in urban America, including Boston, Massachusetts, or Los Angeles, California, and you'll see approximately 20% of the people walking outside with masks on their faces in 2024, almost 2025. That speaks a lot about the state of fear in America today, and I don't think it's changed much since 2020.
Have you sensed or theorized who is behind that? Who was driving the fear? Was it a coordinated effort or something that just happened?
I think what happened was a crime of opportunity. I'm not a conspiracy theorist in the sense that there's a group of people in hoods sitting in a cave somewhere outside of Davos planning the next 100 years. And if they are, they're not going to be very successful. What I think happened was there was a confluence of opportunities among disparate groups who all had something to gain by instilling fear. And then they organized loosely at first, and then I think more directly later, once they realized after testing the waters that people would comply and there would be very, very little pushback. And that includes politicians, media, and corporations. And of course, there's subgroups that support these entities, like, for example, the teachers union. The teachers union is a very powerful organization, politically and financially, and they're near and dear to my heart as a child psychiatrist because they basically wrecked the youth culture in the United States. They don't care about students. They only care about themselves and supporting their salaries. And so it was the teachers unions primarily that led the drive and supported the efforts of local politicians and health departments to shut the schools down for up to 2 years. Now, if that doesn't raise questions in your mind about the sincerity and the authenticity of who really cares for children, what will?
Do you think it's possible that fear made us sicker? And by that I mean, we always hear things reduce our immunity when your body is stressed or when certain things happen physiologically because you're afraid. Can that impact your immune system, and can that stand to make us sicker if we do get COVID than we might have been?
Absolutely. What fear does is induces, in a chronic sense, a stress response. And stress does two things. It does something to the body, which, as you say, is largely speaking, lowering immunity, lowering your resistance to all forms of infection, and also long-term disease like cancer. Cancer is very highly linked to stress. It also does something psychologically, which is one who is afraid, one who is in a state of fear all the time, is constantly trying to control his environment. He develops obsessional thinking and compulsive behaviors. He limits his exposure to risk-taking. He stops being productive. He basically consolidates himself into a small space, which is largely speaking his home, or if at work, his home office. And this doesn't lead to growth psychologically. In children, it leads to autism, it leads to social autism, it leads to poor language development, it leads to, as you say, ill physical health because you're probably not eating well, you're not exercising. So there's this whole vicious circle that occurs when someone's in a chronic state of fear. Their body, their mind, their emotional state all start to decline, and they become very, very easily controlled. And I think that ultimately is the goal here, is control, because when you have a consolidation of power, as we've seen politically and economically in the last 2-3 years, one group of people stands to benefit at the expense of everyone else when there's an easy road to control the population. That's why I think this happened, and that's why I think it's continuing.
When talking about fear, I think this was the first illness where a lot of people, when they got sick, even if they weren't very sick, thought, I might die. I think before that, even if you got the flu and you felt really lousy, most people didn't think, this might kill me. And now I think that's what crosses a lot of people's mind if they hear the word COVID, or at least it was.
It is, because they were told, using a lot of, to be blunt, falsified images and some actual propaganda films out of Asia, that there was a mass death wave of healthy people who were infected by this virus that left the Wuhan lab in China in late 2019, early 2020. That was entirely false. The survival rate from this virus, and now the variants, of course, are basically like common colds, but at the beginning, the survival rate was actually 99.997% in the entire population. And in the healthy population, under about age 65, 70, it was nearly 100%. In children, it was exactly 100% under the age of 16. And that was proven in Sweden, which didn't close their schools down up until end of high school. Not a single child died in Sweden in 2021 and 2022 of this virus, despite the schools being open the entire time. So a lot of what they were told, what we were told, was factually untrue and provably untrue. But because it was so scary, and because people truly believed that this was the Black Death on steroids, there was nothing that could be done except hiding out, staying in their homes, and avoiding contact with people. That was the message, and that's what people believed, even though it was untrue, and it still is untrue today.
What is mass psychosis?
So I wrote about this in my first book, United States of Fear, how America fell victim to a mass delusional psychosis. And the way that I describe it is a moment in time, now to some degree ongoing, 4 years later, where an entire population all goes crazy at the same time. And that's basically what happened in the United States in 2020. It wasn't rational, it wasn't protective, it was actually harmful. And it was, as I said earlier, driven largely by a confluence of power groups, media corporations, and a small subset of politicians and teachers' unions and their supporters and backers to drive the insanity. So a mass delusional psychosis, from the way that I'm describing it and defining it in my book, is really an irrational, self-harming, but groupthink response to a modest or minor problem. And unfortunately, this issue, this movement that occurred in 2020 and moving forward, it's the first time in the United States history, in my lifetime anyway, that anything like this has happened. And I think it's the first time because it's the first time in the last 2 or 3 generations that America has had the ability to instill so quickly and so powerfully and so chronically a feeling of fear in the population.
I guess that was made possible in a way because of technology and the internet and so on that couldn't have happened 50 years ago.
Exactly. I have something in my pocket called a smartphone that I believe is the primary driver of the psychosis of 2020, along with what we're seeing in the youth population, which is a complete loss of socialization, obesity, anxiety, body dysmorphia in girls, gaming addiction in boys, and ultimately deaths by drug overdose, specifically fentanyl, delivered to homes through apps like Snapchat, as well as suicides among a lot of young girls. And now we're seeing actually sex trafficking and children, young girls primarily, being kidnapped and taken to foreign countries as sex slaves. That is happening through the phone, almost entirely. The phone has really wrecked our culture. It's wrecked the adult culture. It's wrecked the child culture. Today, I tell parents, if there's one thing that you want to do to protect your children, take away their smartphone. Do not allow them to have one at all until they're 18 and they become an adult. I think that would solve many of the problems we have in our country.
As an observer with a special viewpoint as a psychiatrist, when you saw all of this happening, what was that like for you? Did you just kind of want to shake people and try to wake them up? Or What was that like?
I tried to educate people at first. I thought that this was just an information problem. Well, if people have the right information, they'll be able to make good decisions. What I realized after a month or two of the insanity, March or April of 2020, was this was not an informational problem. This was a problem of an absence or at least temporary inability to think critically. And I believe that that ability to think critically, which has been under attack and really being undermined for 20 or 30 years now in the US through a whole problem of our educational system and media and cell phones, that problem was exacerbated due to the weaponization of fear. Because when people are afraid, they stop thinking critically. They don't have the space to think. They only do what they're told because they need to survive. And they were told that if they don't do A, B, and C, put a mask on, get a shot, stay home, they will not survive. And not only that, they will kill the other people in their family. That's a pretty hard message to hear and just slough off. So if people are in a state of constant fear, they cannot do the right thing. They cannot think critically, even if you give them the correct information. So eventually I decided, stop trying to educate people and start trying to assess the psychology. Start trying to assess, for example, curiosity. It's hard to be scared and curious at the same time. So people who are curious tend to be more amenable to information, to thinking, to changing their ways. But those who are not curious, and there's a lot of, unfortunately, uncurious Americans today, I believe that they are, at least in the moment in time when they are not curious, they're hopeless. They can't be saved. You can only help somebody if that person is open to receiving a message. And many Americans today are still closed off. They're not curious. They're still scared. And they're living a kind of closed, sheltered, zombified life. It's very, very painful to see. I hate to see it in my home, my neighborhood, my practice, my city, but it's still going on today.
What do you think lies ahead?
I am not a very optimistic person when it comes to the American culture today. I've recently said that even though there's a lot of bad actors at the top of the food chain that I would like to hold responsible and accountable for what's happened the last 4 years, I think we need to hold ourselves accountable. I think we need to acknowledge that America is not a virtuous country anymore. It's largely a country of cowards. It's a country of narcissists. And cowardice and narcissism is what has led to the election of politicians that reflect those values and those character traits, and people who are in positions of power. And until we can reform, until we can get off of our comfortable butts and start to take risks again, start to look right and left laterally for support instead of vertically to the state, I don't really see much changing.
You can watch my interview with Dr. Mark McDonald on this week's Sunday episode of Full Measure. To find out where to watch on TV, go to SharylAttkisson.com and click the Full Measure tab. You can find a station near you. But if you happen to be listening to this after the air date, or if it's easier for you to watch online anyway, you can always go to fullmeasure.news. We feed the program live around 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Sundays. They're online, and then post the program afterwards. So you can watch this segment or search for other segments of interest at fullmeasure.news. My bestseller, Follow the Science, How Big Pharma Misleads, Obscures, and Prevails, has never been more relevant. And the last time I checked, this 5-star bestseller was on sale for half price at Amazon. I hope you'll consider picking up a copy. Proceeds support independent journalism. That's Follow the Science. And as always, visit SharylAttkisson.com and click the Store tab for some fascinating, original, and exclusive items designed just for independent thinkers like you, with slogans such as, do your own research, make up your own mind, think for yourself.